Good evening. Let's call our meeting to order, and I will ask the treasurer to call the roll.
Ms. Adair? Present. President Baker?
Present.
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Vice President Cole?
Here.
Ms. Gibbs?
Here.
Mr. Ragland?
Present.
Ms. Reyes?
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. And in honor of his birthday, which is tomorrow, I would like to ask Board Member Brown to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please be upstanding.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you all for being here this evening. Allow me to briefly read through the agenda just so we all know the work before us. After we adopt the agenda, we will hear public comment. We do have a number of individuals who have signed up to provide testimony this evening. After that, we will hear from the board's 3 direct reports. Each of them will provide a report to us. We will then take up some board matters, after which we will consider our consent agenda. After we have discussed and dispensed with our consent agenda, we will then have announcements, points of pride from my colleagues. We will then recess into executive session. So having said that, is a motion that we approve it as presented.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Treasurer?
Ms. Adair? Yes. President Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Vice President Cole?
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs?
Yes.
Mr. Ragland?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. All right, let's move on then to our speakers. We do have 3. Just so you all know the rules of speaking before the board, each of you will have 4 minutes. I'll call your name, I'll state the topic and the board action that you are requesting, and I'll ask you to come to the podium. There will be a timer you'll see on the screen, and when you get to 4 minutes, please do try to conclude. Our first speaker this evening is Mr. Charles Tennant. Topic, Columbus Afrocentric Early College Marquee. Board action requested, listen to my plan for the marquee. Mr. Tennant, good evening. Welcome back.
Thank you. Mr. Baker, members of the board, Madam Superintendent, Mr. Treasurer, I am happy to be here. In front of you, you should have a copy of a marquee that I designed. I've given very careful study to a marquee, and I don't want an average-looking marquee out at the school. I even looked at where to place it. If you look at it, you will see 2 purple papyrus columns on the side. The papyrus column is the first column ever erected on the earth in ancient Egypt. And just in case some of you don't know what Egypt means, it means the land of the blacks, land of the blacks. These columns were taken out of the ground in one piece. And when the Greeks built theirs, they could not take them out in one piece. At the bottom, you'll see black brick. There are 8 rows. And I used 8 because the number 8 means complete. And up at the top, where you see home of the Nubians, you'll see 7 rows of black brick. 7 means a new beginning. At the top, you'll see an Egyptian pyramid. It's exaggerated a little bit, but in the middle, you'll see a golden Nubian pyramid. And I can assure you, there is no marquee on this planet like this one. You look at it on the right, from the side, it looks like an obelisk. Look at it, it looks like an obelisk. So the screen is 4 feet by 8 feet. I want to put it where the flagpole is, and I've given it very, very special consideration as to where to put it. But I put it out on James Road, I became afraid of graffiti, and you have a bus stop there. And then the engineers told me I couldn't have 2 things that use electricity there. I looked at Allegheny, and I looked at the traffic pattern coming in, and 80% of all the people come in off of Gould into the school, into the parking lot. So this is where I would like to see this marquee. Secondly, many people have asked me why we need an Afrocentric school, and there are over 100,000 schools in the United States in 3,000 counties. But in these schools, nothing dealing with Afrocentric history, culture, or values are mentioned. And this school is very important because this is done. And I don't know if you know this, but over 98% of all the seniors graduated from the Afrocentric school. And I'm so proud of that. Are there any questions?
Colleagues, are there any clarifying questions for Mr. Tennant? Mr. Ragland? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, Mr. Tennant, thank you first and foremost for doing the due diligence to get this type of proposal before us. Is this something that we could consider a project for our students to undertake? We've got several entities throughout the district where our students may be able to tackle something like this as a project for Columbus Afrocentric. And I know that we've talked about varying ways that we could get the financing for something like this to be done. But it seems to me, with the historical nature of this project and the significance of it for Afrocentric, that this might be something where we could incorporate some learning for our young people. Have you considered anything like
I
that?
certainly have. Peggy McClare is going to be mad with me because I just saw her just a minute ago and I gave her this big hug and she looked at me like she was saying, "What now?" I think Fort Hayes would be a beautiful entity in this. It's not as complicated as the Nubian pyramid. That took a lot of work. And with this, it'll take work. I think the most difficult thing would be the closed bud papyrus columns. I want them purple because it represents the color of the school. The black brick represents the color of the school. They go in purple and black. I looked at a two-sided screen, Mr. Ragland, but I don't think we need it where I want to put it. It'll be where the flagpole is coming in front of the school. It'll be about 10 feet tall. It'll be big enough where everybody on the street can see. And this is probably the part we would have to order to bring in here.
Yes, sir.
I don't believe in putting on $1,000 suit and a $25 pair of shoes. So we have a $45 million school. We need a marquee to match it. And I tell you, this is one of a kind, and it will blend in with the entire history of the Afrocentric school. And for those of you who don't know the definition of Nubian, I want to make it very clear. Nubian comes from the Greek word nub, which means gold. And they found a lot of gold in Nubia. Nubia used to be called Tarseti, land of the bow. And the people were tribal. So I want to do something to show the greatness that they had in that country because it's not mentioned. And this is the perfect example. Mr. Cole, you have a question?
Thank you. Any other
I think you actually spoke to it. I'd love to see how we can marry our students. And the reason being is that the pyramid, the Nubian pyramid that was built with student hands in part. So I think that there's a wonderful opportunity here to marry it. So there's historical precedent as much as there is a request. So please, I love, Mr. President, if our superintendent consider that moving forward.
I have no doubt that she will. Board Member Adair, did you have a clarifying question? No? Any other clarifying questions, colleagues? Okay. As always, Mr. Tennant, we thank you.
Thank you, and I'll be back if it's not moving. You know that.
We know. Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Tell your wife hello from us. All right. Thank you. Our next speaker, Clara Laverne Alston Hooper. Topic, improving test scores. Board action requested, improves test scores by improving the conditions in which teaching and learning is being held. Please approach the podium, Ms. Alston Hooper. Good evening. Thank you for being here. You have 4 minutes. Thank you so much.
President Baker, Vice President Cole, Treasurer Bahoric, Internal Auditor Smith, members of the board, and Superintendent Dixon. I'm a retired elementary school teacher with over 30 years of experience in the classroom. I taught over 20 years in South Carolina, beginning in a school that did not have central air conditioning for the first few years. Recently, I had the opportunity to help set up a classroom in one of your legacy schools. After a very short time, I knew why your students are not passing their tests and why the state may take over. And it is not the teachers or the students who are the cause. It is the conditions they are being forced to learn in. Children need 3 things to be successful in a learning environment: to be fed, to be clean, and to be comfortable. It is impossible for effective learning to take place in inhumane conditions. In the absence of cool, flowing air, the amount of water teachers and students would have to ingest to keep their bodies cool would result in them having to constantly go to the restroom, which again lessens the ability for learning to take place. The teacher I was helping had purchased some square floor fans, but in the heat we have in a room without windows, I might add, it is almost a waste of money. I invite you to have one of your board meetings in a legacy school. Better still, when you go for a visit to a legacy school, instead of walking through the hallways and passing through, stop and sit in a classroom for 50 minutes, preferably between the hours of 1 and 3, and tell me if you think having to teach and learn in this setting would be encouragement to pay attention, learn, and do well on a test. I understand that the expense of putting air conditioning in legacy schools may be excessive. If each room had 2 mounted industrial fans, one in the front and one in the back, diagonal from each other, a tremendous difference would be seen in the comfort of the room, however. Money has been set aside to send board members whose terms are over at the end of the year on expensive trips. Money has been set aside to provide a generous salary for our new superintendent. Certainly, some money can be set aside for the purchase of industrial fans for the classrooms at the legacy schools so that teachers and students can congregate in an environment conducive to both teaching and learning.
Are there clarifying questions for the speaker? Thank you. Thank you very much for addressing this evening, and thank you for your assistance in our buildings as well. Our final speaker, Melanie Schaefer. Topic, financial literacy across the district. Board action required or requested. Set up a course for high school students to be required to take financial literacy for graduation. Good evening, Ms. Schaefer.
Good evening. Good evening, President Baker, Vice President Cole, Treasurer Bahoric, Internal Auditor Smith, members of the board, and Superintendent Dr. Talisa Dixon. My name is Melanie Schaefer, and I have been teaching in the district more than a decade. Much like many of our students, I came from poverty, and that same poverty inspired me to become a teacher and give back. The longer I was in the profession, the more I learned about my own personal finances, possibly because I was making more money than I ever grew up with. However, I realized I still struggle because of my childhood poverty. My experiences with finances has been through trial and error, but they did not have to be. When I began teaching seniors and having class discussions about their future, it hit me. Similar to me, growing up, they knew nothing about finances, a FICO, or how to manage their money and invest it. Most of them have a smartphone with a stocks app, but do not know how to use it, and honestly, I am still learning myself. I began to invite financial experts to speak to my students, and I tried to give them an overview of credit, buying a car, student loans, and the impact of defaulting on loans. Basic skills that none of them had, but were expected upon graduation to make lifelong financial decisions. Financial decisions that can come with both benefits and consequences. I could not go into depth in my English course, but I tried, and they truly appreciated it. I knew it was not enough, and that is what brings me here before you today. Our students are our future, but we are systematically holding them back and repeating a cycle of generational poverty. As a large, reputable urban district, we should understand that our curriculum should be relevant to the 21st century. We provide our students with a liberal arts education encompassing the humanities and arts. However, we do not necessarily provide them with the essential life skills to navigate the world. We know through research that poverty is a result of many things and is often generational. It is difficult to teach someone about something you know nothing about. Many people, rich and poor, are not financially literate, and honestly, that is the most important understanding you need in order to get out of poverty. No matter if a student chooses college, the military, or the workforce, they must understand what a FICO is and how to buy a car, and most importantly, how to manage and grow their money. It is our duty to enable them to progress. We know our demographics, and it is a disservice to our children not to teach them these skills. If we want our students to overcome systematic racism and classism and compete financially in our world, we need to provide a relevant curriculum for our students. When I grew up, credit was a misnomer. Myself and many of my peers were victims of our parents using our Social Security numbers to secure things as basic as utilities. They were needed for survival, but if they did not pay them, they felt the necessary evil was to use their children's credit as a backup. Technology was not as advanced, and now credit is closely monitored. Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax can ruin your life today. Without credit or even with bad credit, opportunities are limited in society. As we know, employers run credit checks to determine an employee's dependability. As a society, we are essentially discriminating against people who come from poverty without saying it. They are the victims that will often be subjected to making less and paying more for items due to their credit alone. This is a true injustice. How can we as an urban district sit back and allow our students to be uneducated about the very thing that rules our society, money and how you obtain and maintain it? We service the most at-risk population, but do not give them the tools for success in this world that is regulated by stock markets and Wall Street. It is unequivocally wrong to have a curriculum that does not address the important means to success. Suburban districts and parents are teaching their children about financial literacy. Meanwhile, who is teaching our children? We are leaving them behind. To me, this is a perpetuation of the very systematic racism and classism we try to defeat every day in the classroom. There needs to be a financial literacy curriculum across the district in every high school. How can we teach our children about their future and leave the foundation out? We know many of them are trying to break the cycle of poverty. If you do not instruct them about what causes it, then they will leave and repeat it. Something must be done now. This will make our children and communities we serve stronger. With these skills, they will be able to progress and support their communities. We need to bridge the gap, not perpetuate more inequity because between the haves and have-nots. Student loan debt, upside-down mortgages, and overall financial negligence keep our students behind and constantly struggling to get out of debt. We can change this. It should be required for every student to graduate. Tomorrow, we are going to have a convocation where we talk about how much we love our students and what they deserve. I am telling you here and now, as a Columbus City Schools graduates and teacher in the district, I love our kids and believe that our students deserve to be financially literate in the 21st century. I am asking the board to please implement the curriculum as a graduation requirement under the numeracy initiatives of the district. I will assist in any way I can to get this off the ground, and I truly believe our community partners will as well. Thank you, and I'm sorry I exceeded the time.
Thank you, Ms. Schaefer.
I left a paragraph out.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, other clarifying questions? Board Member Gibbs?
Thank you for coming. I guess I have a question for our policy team around House Bill 108 and House Bill 391, which addresses financial literacy from our House legislators. I'm not sure where that bill is. Is Dr. Roush here? I don't know if you're familiar with it now, and I don't know if he's prepared to speak about it, but can you give us information on those bills later? Both of those are House bills in the House that deal with the inclusion of financial literacy in our curriculum. So, I mean, we've passed several bills to include it, and then they've undone several of those bills. So it is not as a part of this board that we don't want financial literacy or that it's not happening in certain schools. But I support the financial literacy and not sure where these bills are in terms of the new House legislation, and our legislative team will bring us that information so we can clearly understand it. But systemic racism occurs not just from financial literacy, but people who support it and keep those actions intact. So it's more than just the students. There are adults who are intent on treating other people based on their class and their economic status. So there's a whole system of people who keep that in order. And clearly breaking through the economic poverty of it all helps students navigate very well. But we as a district don't support institutional racism or economic disparity of any kind, because education is the key to breaking through all of those. So I am glad you are a strong advocate of it, and I hope that our legislature and everyone in our House and our Department of Education can come together and build us a financial curriculum that'll work in our district.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs. And Ms. Schaefer, if you were not able to share all of your testimony, you can submit it electronically, or if you have hard copies, you can give that to staff, just to make sure we
I
get to
did
see it
provide
all.
Yes.
Board Member Ragland?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your service to the district, Ms. Schaefer. I guess my question would be to the superintendent regarding this. I know that you are focusing on equity across the district, and it seems as if this may be happening in some schools, but not in others. Can we find out how we are tracking how our students are doing that are getting financial literacy within their classrooms, and maybe figure out a way as a part of our equity initiative? Maybe that might be a job for our chief equity officer once they come on board, to talk about how this may be going across the board, because I agree with Board Member Gibbs. While we do not support any type of discriminatory practices, there may be some haves and some have-nots within the district, just based on who may be teaching these courses, who may naturally take the initiative to do them, but others might not have a set curriculum. This might be worth it for Ms. Schaefer and some of her other teammates that are working with her to talk about what curriculum may look like as a part of our long-term strategic plan. To me, I don't like waiting for the state to do something that we know that we should be doing.
Right.
And I think that we have the capacity to incorporate something like this. We definitely have the talent, and we definitely, as virtue of Ms. Schaefer being here, have the initiative to see if we can't get something done. And so I would imagine that all of my colleagues agree that this is a very important piece. And as the father of a senior at EA, I know that she and her friends talk about this quite a bit. It's like, why aren't we learning the practical things that we need to be successful in life? But you've got us doing some of these other things. And so I guess my question is to you: do you think that that's something that is viable, Dr. Dixon? Okay.
Absolutely, yep. Okay.
Mr. Ragland, I think it's a good point. Recent history has taught us we cannot count on the General Assembly.
Yes, sir.
Good point, fair point. Any other
Yes, sir.
clarifying questions for the speaker? Yes, Mr. Vice President?
My question is, how early do you think that this curriculum should be introduced? I'm one of those parents, like Mr. Ragland, who actually has a kid studying personal finance this year as a sophomore in high school. So I do know that there are some haves and have-nots throughout the district. But how early do you think this curriculum should be introduced?
With financial literacy, I think you can start as early as kindergarten, first grade, budgeting, saving money, teaching children how to manage their money. But I think primarily for our district, even if we, I really want us to start at the high school level, because I really think that those skills are lacking with our high school students. They're leaving here, they don't have those skills. They're repeating generational poverty. And I was a victim of it myself. I went to the colleges, I signed up for the credit cards, I ended up defaulting, I went to law school, I couldn't afford them, and I don't want that to happen to our students. You know, I'm an English teacher, and I was forced to put it in my curriculum, and I had them read books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Had them, and that's a book on kind of an elementary, middle school level, teaching children how to budget, how to own their own business, how to become an entrepreneur. Those are things that you can teach as early as kindergarten, first grade. But I really think it's vital for high school students now to be able to have these skills because, as we all know, the world revolves around money. They have all the tools on their smartphones and all the technology that they need to be able to invest now. One of the things that one of my speakers had brought to my students was, you can download the Robinhood app. You can buy stocks. He taught them how to do that, and a couple of them did it, and they were impressed with their returns. So I definitely feel that if we're going to teach students things like algebra and things that they don't usually use anymore, we definitely need to make them financially literate because we are repeating a cycle of poverty. And that is not acceptable to me, especially knowing our demographics.
I thank you so much. I admire your courage, and thank you for being here.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. Thank you for listening.
I believe Board Member Gibbs has one more
Oh,
final
I'm sorry.
clarifying question,
I'm
Ms.
sorry.
Schaefer.
Dr. Dixon, as you're looking at it, can you, because I know you're going to find information from whatever that is in programs, do you know of any parent components to this curriculum, or have you researched, and I'm sure Dr. Dixon's team, this is why this is a dual address, can find some type of curriculum that has a parent component as well? So we're not only educating the parents, maybe you may have known of one, so I hope you can share that.
I don't know of any, but I know that with community partnerships, we have mentors that come in the district. I don't think it would be beyond us as a district to have a community outreach curriculum for parents and families of our district as well. I mean, it is vital to not just the kids, but their parents as well, obviously. I know that with one of the things I was thinking about is I follow a speaker, Melody Hobson. She's a financial analyst for blackamericaweb.com. She talks about how her company had adopted a school, and they provided them with scholarships and investments at an early age, and they were able to grow up. Those are the types of community partnerships that we need. And I even think that with all the wonderful people in Columbus, Ohio, all the executives, all the CEOs, we have a foundation here that we can tap into that can help not only the students, but also the families in our community.
Indeed.
All right, Board Member Reyes, clarifying question for the speaker?
Well, actually, I was just going to clarify for Board Member Gibbs. Every banking institution has a curriculum being over a community center. I will tell you, almost every bank has offered me a curriculum in multiple languages. So, in multiple languages. So many of the community centers around the city already have some. Doesn't mean that we don't, but as we do our research, if we want to include adult, they're available from, I'm not going to mention which banks, but most of them, if not all of them, have them.
Right, yeah, I'm clear about that. I used to work at the Urban League. They have an amazing 700 credit score program that is for the community. And I also know we have an amazing set of community partnerships. And so I don't want the community to believe that we're not teaching any financial literacy, because it's going on through many of our partnerships, as well as our, as you say, you bring it in classes. But as our superintendent is looking at a holistic curriculum, one that can work at elementary, middle school, and high, that aligns with our equity and our vision of our equity work that we're doing, that we look at something that's comprehensive for students as well as parents, because parents are the first teachers, right? Mm-hmm. And so when your parents are strong, as you say, because your story isn't unique, that then they have an even stronger foundation to financial literacy, and they can do things that make sense. When we took home ec out of school, where I learned how to do a lot of that work, to trade off for some of these other courses, we lost a lot of that. And so we're trying to put this back in home ec. And, kids can't sew either. And some of them can't cook, they can't iron. So there's a lot of travesties across the board I think we lost, but specifically for financial literacy, we don't want to use total, because we do have kids who can do it well, but where our superintendent can find and align with what's coming down the legislative pike, I'm confident we'll be able to address it.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, many suburban districts, since I did my student teaching, have these courses across the board, required for all of their students. And, one of the reasons why I came to you today is because I feel that we're far behind that, and we need to catch up. and make sure it's uniform across the district, not just in 1 or 2 high schools, but all of our high schools need this component. Okay?
Thank you, Ms. Schaefer. Thank you very much for coming
Have a
down.
great
We
evening.
appreciate it. Thank you. All right, let's move on then to, that's our final speaker. So we're going to move on to hear from our direct reports. And first up, Madam Superintendent, have you a report for the board?
Good evening.
Good evening.
I don't have a formal report tonight because we have convocation tomorrow, so just wanted to remind everyone of tomorrow is our convocation day. We were expecting all of our staff members, all the members of our families to come together to hear one message. This event has been planned for some time. I thank the team who had planned this event prior to my arrival. In anticipation of a new superintendent and a new vision. So I'm excited that we're going to move this event forward. I'm asking all of you to wear a hint of red. You know, all of us are wearing red tomorrow to show the spirit of CCS. So we're excited about that. So if you have a red tie or red pin, I'm going to wear that. All of us are wearing red tomorrow, one family united. So excited about that. But we do have a new member of our team who I would like to introduce you to, and that is the new principal of Southwood Elementary, Ms. Miracle Reynolds. Miracle, can you stand up? Thank you. Just wanted to recognize her. So again, we're excited about tomorrow. Should be a great event. We anticipate it'll be good to have everyone together, fellowshipping, and getting ready to welcome our students in. This week I've been on the news Friday morning, Monday morning, this morning, talking about all the great things we're anticipating this year and all the work that the team members are doing to prepare. So thank you to all of those who are working hard to make sure our buildings are ready, and transportation team is ready. All the secretaries, building leaders, our teachers are getting the classrooms together. Saturday, I see John Caniglo, he's in the back. John and I and about 60 volunteers were stuffing backpacks. So that was awesome to see students and people across the not only the district, but across the county coming together to make sure that our students have their supplies ready. And then the last thing, we had graduation. You know, that's a culminating event. So we had some special graduates that did not give up. They stayed the course, and it was just warmed my heart to see our graduates at East High School on Saturday. So that was a great event. So thank you all to our teachers and others and our administrators who, and other support people who said students do not give up. The race is not given to the swift. And so we keep pushing our students to the end, and they made it and they celebrated. And it felt good. And the last thing I would say, one of the principal of West High School, when he stood on stage and he said, I want all 4 corners of this city to give a round of applause for our students. And that just stuck with me, you know, to remind us that there are different parts of this city, but we all have one mission, right? And to make sure all of our students are successful throughout the entire county. We have our share, but we want all of our students to be successful. So excited about tomorrow, excited about the first day, and all the great work that we're going to do as we strive to make Columbus City Schools a national model for urban education. Right, thank you.
Colleagues, any questions for the superintendent?
Yes,
Mr. Vice President?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you so much, Madam Superintendent. Quick question about this graduating cohort. Can you give us a few facts about how many students graduated this year, the importance particularly of this cohort moving forward in terms of our grade presence or our grade position with the state of Ohio? This is a pretty important cohort. This is a group of graduates that was very special.
Right, I don't have that data to share, but I know we do have 100, we were 100 graduates. I know
Yes.
that, but all the data for them, I apologize, and I know you're going to ask that question. I would have been able to share that data with you tonight. If another team member, Michelle, Dr. Klein, if you can come up, please. I know she has that information
She
for
does.
us. Thank you, Dr. Klein. If you can share
Thank
that,
you,
please.
Dr. Dixon. To board members' question, I do not have the exact number, but what I can tell you, and the most important news for Columbus City Schools, remember graduation is always 1 year in the rears.
Yeah.
And then the 5-year rate is 2 years in the rears. So the students that Ms. Gillison led a team last year in making sure that we saw them through were the class of 2018, and some of them just graduated on Saturday. Their percentage and the number of students that we have seen through from the class of 2018 for 5-year rate will be on our report card in 2020 and will be a C is in cat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And again, the great work, as she stated, the graduation, that push was, that process already started before me, right? So I'm just celebrating with the students. So that work was done prior to me, the hard work, the heavy lifting that was done, the planning. It's hard when you get students to the finish line, because you have to do that extra push, because some of them want to give up. And that's why I said those students that finish in the summer, even though many of them friends did not give up, someone pushed them to stay the course. And to have the celebration that we had for the district, to honor them, to have all the principals of every high school there and board members, I think it's an extra special time because they get to see everyone. That piece, I don't want us to minimize that, they went the extra mile and stayed in the race and finished. So that's a special group of people.
Absolutely. Any other questions for the superintendent on her report?
I just want to thank Dr. Stanford and the team,
Mr. Vice President?
Ms. Gillison, the entire team, for all the work that you did in your interim role as superintendent to help bring us to the next level. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you, Madam Superintendent. Colleagues, let's move on then and hear from our internal auditor. Madam Internal Auditor, have your report this evening?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I'm trying to see. There we go. Okay. President Baker, Vice President Coe, members of the Board of Education. At the June 27, 2019 Audit and Accountability Committee meeting, the committee voted to recommend acceptance of the Office of Internal Audit's fiscal year 2020 work plan and forward the work plan to the board for adoption. A copy of the work plan schedule was part of the consent agenda for a later vote by the board. The committee provided feedback on the work plan throughout the process. The work plan includes 17 audit activities. The plan also includes hours dedicated for coordination with the external auditors, management of the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline, and consultation and facilitation with management. Upon approval by the board, the work plan will be placed on the district website. As audit reports are released, I will continue to provide the board with a high-level overview of the audit results, and all reports are sent to the board upon a vote released by the Audit and Accountability Committee. The committee also voted on the release of 2 reports. One report covered the activity involving the WCBE radio station and the large and previously unreported outstanding balance to NPR. A thorough discussion was had and the report was approved for release and publication. This report is posted on the district website. The second report was on a planned report of schools, the second report was on a planned report of school on-site audits. One school was commended for the effort they put into tracking their Chromebooks. The report only had 1 high-risk item identified and 3 low-risk items. So once again, the schools are to be commended. We have received corrective action plans for all recommendations and will perform follow-up activities at a later date. A thorough discussion was had and the report was approved for release and publication. This report also is posted on the district's website. During that same meeting, I provided an overview of the dashboard report, and I will walk you through that. Okay. And this was discussed at the June 27th Audit and Accountability Committee meeting. So once again, the first section just gives a high-level overview of the type of engagements that were planned, the status of those engagements as of June 30th. I'm happy to say most of those are now closed at this point in time. The second report is just a more detailed, if someone wanted to know, okay, exactly what makes up those numbers on that first slide, here's the detail of what makes up the information in the first slide. So you can see, for an example, and I'll go into more detail, we had a quality assurance improvement process. At June 27th, it was in process. It has since been completed. So when I do this report at the A&A committee next week, you'll see a different status for these engagements. So this is how this report flows. Continuation of the detail. And then once again, this is just for someone who doesn't like dealing with all those words. You can get a quick visual of where we stand. You have, oh, well, where are we showing the grants access? Go down to the last row, and you'll see we were in the field work phase. Well, where do we stand on the third grade reading guarantee? You can see that report has been issued. So once again, same information, different format. This slide here just talks about any additions or deletions that we had made to the annual work plan. This one, once again, is a work in process. We have implemented our automated work papers, and that will really help us get a quick way to track open issues. Right now, it's very manual, very labor intense. So once we implement our automated work papers, this information will be filled in. Once again, just an update on the different activity during the month of June. Professional development that the staff attended during the month of June. Once again, different activity planned from July through September. A little bit more information on the projects that we did during the month of June. You can see we have the QAIP. I'll go into more detail on that in a few minutes. I talked about our audit management software implementation. We are always looking for ways to be cost effective, so we're evaluating if there's another option for addressing the hotline. Right now we have a Cadillac, and we might be able to get by with something that still meets our needs and not quite so pricey. So that's what this one is. Or something in between, a little bit higher than that, but. And then because I had not presented to the committee at the time where our budget stands, I just went over a high-level update as far as where our staffing for FY19 stood, where it stands for FY20. You can see there's no additions, and then what the numbers for our non-personnel budget look like. So that was the dashboard report. And then finally, it's a ta-da moment. We went through peer review. So every year for the past 3 years, I have been giving the committee an update on our internal assessment process. And we go through it, and I have someone who has not led an audit look at our processes internally to see, okay, this is what, best practice is, how do we compare to that? And then they'll give me a report, and I report out to Audit and Accountability, how we did. We're doing good in this area. We need to make some more tweaks in this area. This is what we're going to do, and by this such and such a date. This year, I felt we were prepared to have an external review done. So we had a external review done during the week of July 22nd. They were there for a full week. Looked at all of our procedural manuals and our processes and some of our work papers. And like a lot of you, I felt the same way about being audited that some of you feel. I'll just leave it at that. But the good thing was we were found to have processes and procedures in place that met the standards of the international, this is a long name, I have to find it, that met the standards of the Institute of Internal Auditors. So there's 3 levels of a score that you can receive. You can receive does not conform, you can receive partially conform, and you can receive full conformance. So your internal audit shall receive full conformance. So, thank you. More information on the process and the next steps will be discussed at the August 29th Audit and Accountability Committee meeting. President Baker, this concludes my report.
Thank you, Madam Internal Auditor. Congratulations on the positive outcome of your peer review.
Thank
I know
you.
it's not easy, but it's worthwhile, and it lets us know how well you are doing. So we appreciate you continuing to build that world-class internal audit shop that we've talked about for so long. Thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions for the internal auditor? Now, Mr. Cole, you chair the committee. Would you like to make any comments?
Just a very brief comment. Thank you again so very much for your work that illustrates in so many different ways how we are not underperforming, but performing at the level we should be at, or we're continuously improving towards that level. This is a wonderful opportunity that not only informs us and the public, but even your direct report peers, right? Your peers here, the opportunity to see exactly what you're going to be looking at as we move forward in the future, where your concentrations are going to be, and where you guys will continue to collaborate on moving us towards continuous improvement. So thank you so very much, because it's not just your effort, it's yours collaboratively as well that's gotten us into a space of a lot of completion on a lot of things that were long-standing for a long time, even before I got here. So I just thank you for that work. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any other comments for the internal auditor? Again, thank you very much. We appreciate your ongoing efforts and offer our congratulations to your team members as well.
I will. Thank you.
In fact, anybody from internal audit shop in the room? Stand up. All right. Thank you very much. Congratulations.
And they will, Mr. President, convene next week, Thursday as well. So
Yes.
3:30 p.m., Mr. Connor will preside.
Very good. Ms. Gibbs?
I will take an opportunity to publicly thank you for your leadership, your service, and your tremendous team that helps us really run our district more efficiently and more effectively. We have, everyone is not excited when the auditor comes to see them, but we're all better for it. And it allows us to really look inward, and you work with our entire district, and you work with us to get better, to improve, and to make sure we're providing the best service possible. So I do want to thank you. I've seen you, this department, learn, grow, continue to adapt to our new dynamics, and you have always done a tremendous job. So I do thank you, and I thank all of your team on our behalf for their tireless effort, and I know the hours and hours they spend to get things right. So thank you so much.
Yes, Mr. Ragland.
I echo the comments of my colleagues. I guess I do have a question, Auditor Smith. When there are concerns identified within departments, how are internal audits initiated? Like if there are, major concerns that maybe you've identified or maybe other direct reports or board members may have identified, how do you initiate, the process by which an audit comes to bear?
Thank you for that question, Member Ragland. It can happen in a couple of ways. Every year we go through and we do what we call a risk assessment, and that's the risk assessment that I'm about to go into right now is really done for our purposes to help us guide our work. So we'll interview management, we'll interview board members, committee members, we'll consider changes that have happened in the department, such as have you had, a change of a key leader position? Have there been some type of new laws or regulations that have come into effect that you now have to apply with? And we'll consider all of that as we determine, what audits we're going to undertake for the upcoming year. And that's what you'll be voting on in the consent agenda. Now, if something comes about unexpectedly, say someone brings something to our attention, it could be the external auditors, it could be something that comes into the auditor of state through their hotline, and they're like, you know what, we need this. Instead of us working on this, we'll send this to the internal audit department. It could be something that one of you bring to our attention. In that place, we will alter our work plan. We'll make time to address those issues. So it's one of two streams, or it could be something that comes to the hotline. We're also monitoring that, and as things come in our brought to our attention, we evaluate everything. Some things don't rise to the level of, this needs to have an audit done. There's some things are just kind of unsubstantiated, or, okay, we can just turn this over to maybe labor relations or something like that. Other things we need to address. So there's, kind of multiple ways that something can come to our attention and get put on our work, not really our work plan, but that could end up in some type of engagement happening. So when I'm going through my report, you'll hear me talk about audits, the planned audits, and then you'll hear me talk about the special reviews or the special investigation. And those are the things that we had not planned to do, but they came to our attention, such as, the WCBE situation or some other things. And then we will undertake those engagements.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the internal auditor? Thank you very much. We appreciate your work. Let's move on then to our treasurer. Mr. Treasurer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Baker. Good evening. I actually have two reports for you. Both of these reports were presented to and reviewed by the Finance Committee, which met last Wednesday for kind of a lengthy meeting, but we read both of these reports. The first one is for the month ending June. This is the last of the month of the fiscal year, and this is a display of how we ended fiscal 19. Overall, revenues were up about 4%, topping estimates by about $37 million. Expenditures ended up above plan for the year by about $6 million, or just 1%. Those two in combined gave us an ending cash balance was approximately $32 million above what we had originally estimated for the year. For the committee, I did some financial highlights and didn't run through all the typical numerous slides that I have, but they are available and online and in this presentation, but I'll kind of breeze through them. But the financial highlights for fiscal 19 as we ended it, what I pointed out to the committee was that the top two items of revenue, that property taxes and state aid, comprise about 93% of our estimated resources. We ended up within 1% of that, or about $9 million over plan in that area. So I felt that our estimates were very much on target there, being within just 1% of the plan. You'll note that the item that we've talked about all year long, other local revenue, those pilot payments and investment income and the revenue sharing with the city and things like that in the other revenue category, did come in about $26 million over plan. It accounted for the bulk of that increase in cash balance. Other than that, there really was nothing that noteworthy in the end of the year for the revenue side. We moved on to expenditures, and one of the things I noted for the committee, because we had discussed this as well all year long, was a variance that occurred in the area of personnel and the split between salaries and wages and the benefit line item. And I had identified for the committee that the estimate for benefits seemed to be proportionally higher than what we were seeing in the salary and wages side. And so if you look at the plan, about 70% of the personnel line is budgeted for salaries and wages, 30% of the line for benefits, yet the amount of variance, about 53% of the variance occurred in the benefit line item. And so as we discussed this over the year, we factored that into our planning for the May forecast and lowered the projection in the fringe benefit area. And you'll see in July where that variance is more proportionately split now between benefits and salaries. The other line item I pointed out to them was about third from the bottom, the transfers out. You'll see that the year-to-date actual was $34 million versus $4 million in the plan, and that variance of $31 million was attributed to our transfers that we made for the Dominion Brookhaven North realignment, as well as the little just under $900,000 for the WCB issue. So I took the transfer out, since that is a kind of a one-off situation, as far as it wasn't planned for or anticipated. And if we take that out, then we would have ended the year about 25 million under without that transfer on 915 million estimated. So that would have been in the 2 to 3% area under, but we did the transfer. And it was fortunate that we had the cash available to take care of those issues and fund that initiative to realign those programs. After that, the typical graphs that we have that I've presented before showing pretty much the three major categories of revenues. Breaking down other revenues, you can see there we're a little bit redundant in that within all the other revenues, we have a line item actually called other revenues, and that's the pilots and investment income line. You can see that it sticks out here in the graph. It's very evident there. The percentage breakdown for our revenues for fiscal year 19, 53% funded by local property taxes, 37% by state aid, and then other financing sources represent the balance of 10%. You'll see in the other revenue categories, that 5% blue portion, a little bit distorted this year because of the way income came in. So I don't anticipate, for instance, pilots to be quite as high for next year. When you look at the data, you see a cycle in those pilot payments, and they tend to climb every 3 years, which is in line with the triennial update and sexennial full reappraisal of property values. When those updates and reappraisals occur, it spurs a lot more activity at the Board of Revision, and we are a participant in that. We switch over to expenditures, and again, you can see that other than all other expenditures, the lines are running very close to plan, but still under plan. And when we look at the other expenditure category, you'll see that other uses, again, that kind of jumps off the chart here, and that's where those transfers are posted. Look down at the breakdown for expenditures for fiscal 19, personnel at 64%, and charter at 21%, and other was 15%. But again, notice in the blowout of that pie chart, other uses at 5% is distorted by that one-time transfer. Typically, personnel would be around 66%, and charter in the 22-23% range, and that's what we would expect in this ensuing fiscal year. I've discussed variances, but graphically representing them, presenting them to the committee. Again, this is just a visual way of drawing our attention to these particular categories. Again, all other revenue is pretty obvious. I explained to the committee where that came from, 14.6 million over plan in pilots, 7.3 million in investment income, 3.8 million in Medicaid. Remember, we got 2 reimbursements this year instead of 1. They're catching up because they're always in arrears, so we still anticipate 1 payment in next fiscal year. And then about 0.8 or 800,000 in additional in the category win-win and City of Columbus income tax sharing. That's really city income tax sharing. We get that in that June, July timeframe, and it depends upon when they distribute it as to which fiscal year it falls in. So we explained that. Just another graphical representation or a chart representation of that data I just explained. On the expenditure side, again, you'll see other uses. Jumps off the page at you in terms of the percent variance as well as the dollar amount. And that pretty much clears up or concludes June, where we ended up in revenues over in expenditures, but up in cash balance overall. If I may, I'll roll right into the July report. First month of the fiscal year, so it's kind of an interesting time. It's the first month that we can compare to the plan that I developed. And what I reported to the committee, was to discuss about how the plan was developed. We based on the revenue side, we based that on the May 2019 5-year forecast. Remember that forecast was developed before the state budget was enacted. And I can't remember if I've talked to you about this before. I think I brought it up at the committee, but the expectation for the first year and what came out in the budget plan were pretty much spot on. We're within, like, I think Eric and I tried to reverse engineer how they came up with the number and compared to the plan. It's a little bit of a black box here, but we believe we're within like $70,000 our almost $400 million number. So you'll hear a number that the state has provided an additional $11.8 million to us for next year, and that is in fact very, very close to what we had anticipated in the first place. There's a whole nother discussion of what they're calling that $11.8 million, the impact it has on us from a programmatic and planning and accounting and reporting standpoint, because they're calling it, oh, Eric, what are they calling it? School wellness? Student wellness funds. And so they have some very specific programmatic areas that they expect those dollars to be expended on, but they also have recognized that we're already doing a lot of that, so that it's not $11.8 million in new initiatives that can be supplanted, if you will, with what we're already doing. And the academic team has already been briefed on that, and they understand that fully, and they're moving forward with taking a look at that. The monthly cash flow and revenues, as we have in the past, is based upon prior years' experience. And on the expenditure side, what I did this time was I'm basing it on the revised budget as of July 24th. That's when I captured that revised budget number. And then I adjusted it for our historical spending patterns and trends. So is one of the things we talk about is as we come in and our expenditures are under plan, we want to know if there's a behavioral explanation of that. Is there something, is that just how we operate? Why are we coming in under? And then if you look at the budget versus the cash flow, do we want to make an adjustment in the plan to make it more of a cash flow document? And I have a chart here in a minute, I believe, to show you different documents, different sources of expenditure numbers prepared for different purposes and different uses, but tying that all together. The idea for me is to be able to produce monthly reports that give us an idea of the impact on our financial, of our 5-year forecast, so that when we get around to doing the October number and then the May update, those monthly reports have already prepared us for potential changes and updates and modifications to that. And then the flow month to month, again, was based upon our historical experience, so that we know sometimes you'll hear me say, that's really just a timing issue. Something happened in October, but it happened in November last year, and so the plan is reflective of historical experiences and patterns that just don't bear themselves out. I often have reminded the committee that it's best to look at our finances perhaps on a quarterly basis, so some of that smooths itself out. But again, we watch it monthly and talk about it. One of the tables that I prepared this year for the first time and gave to the committee looks like this. It's in the MD&A, but I blew it up for the committee so you can see it and we can talk about the pieces and parts. But the sources of information here are the 5-year forecast, our original budget. Those are the budgets that are prepared for this year by all the departments. The revised budget is the original plus anything we carry over from last year, and then what the plan is, which is the revised budget adjusted. So they're all used for different purposes. The 5-year forecast for long-term financial planning, the original budget for our budgetary controls for the current year, the revised budget to keep track then of not only the current year's activity and those limits, but also what we bring forward in terms of carry forward purchase orders, to give you a picture of that. Because if we bring forward, we've seen that. One year we had about a $4.5 million textbook order that was budgeted in one year fiscal year and encumbered, but carried forward to the next. So if you looked at revised budget, that would explain why you had a large expenditure in one year, even though you budgeted in the previous year. So that helps us monitor that. And then obviously the plan, because it's based upon revised budget, we can see, are we spending a percentage of our budget as we have in the past? And then when I show the relationship of all of this, we can then monitor to see, will it or will it not have an impact on the 5-year forecast, and if so, in what direction? So I went through sections of this report with the committee, the first one being those sources, the forecast, the original budget, what the carryover purchase orders were, revised budget, and the plan. Interesting here, you can see that if you look at the forecast, and I call out advances. Advances are kind of an interesting character. They're really just a cash flow issue that we fund some funds at the end of we provide funds for those entities that, for instance, some of the grant monies, because we're funded in arrear, we're reimbursed in arrears. We need dollars to keep them on a cash basis in the black. So the general fund acts as essentially as a banks, so we advance out funds to them at periodic times throughout the year, especially at the end of the year, and then as cash becomes available the next year, we back it out. But it doesn't have to be appropriated, so it doesn't appear in any of our budget documents. It's just an anomaly, so I call that out there. But if you look at the total line, interestingly enough, that we're at $939,200,000 as planned expenditures in the May forecast. But if you look at our plan, it's calling for just around $922 million. So you'll see about, what's that difference, 922, 913, about $17 million difference, which is pretty much the amount that I talk about when I say we factored in some, organic growth in the cash balance over time, and we know that, when we look out into the future, as cash balances decline, we know that there is some improvement in that already built into our conservative forecasting. So this bears that out. And the next part of the next several columns over, we show the current values, so that we'll be updating that on a regular basis to give to the committee. And then we begin to compute some changes, the difference between the original budget and the forecast, the revised budget, beginning of the year, and forecast, the plan, et cetera. You can see that there. So you'll see that, like I said, the plan is about $17.6 million under what the forecast was, yet our budgeted amounts are about $17 million in the other direction. And so that recognizes the spending pattern of not expending all that we budgeted, and on a revised budget basis, it reflects the carryover purchase orders. So you see all these different sources of information. We can make those comparisons and then have an explanation of what those differences are and what impact they will have on our longer-term financial picture, and we'll monitor that month to month. And last but certainly not least, this is just a comparison of the plan and the current revised budget to where the revised budget started at the beginning of the year. So one of the explanations of variances can be is that we, the departments, have decided to reallocate dollars, say from purchase services to capital outlay. And we can see that movement here. You also see in this movement any increases in appropriation. So you might recall we did 25? I'm looking for a nod of the head, $25,000 change in our appropriation resolution already that the board approved this fiscal year. So you'll see that reflected in there. And this is whenever I pull these numbers, it's a very live number, because on a budgetary side, they're making some adjustments for carryover purchase orders that are liquidated on an ongoing basis. So just another vehicle to keep track of what's going on budgetarily, how's it going to impact the forecast, where are we on case, just how are we doing this year relative to our longer term plans. So I went through that pretty much in that kind of detail with the committee. So with July being the first month, you're going to see some interesting variances. It's kind of I don't do the plan looking at the July actuals, even though I'm in the middle of that month. I like to develop the plan and then do the July numbers, so you do get variances in July. It's no fair to look at July and plug those numbers in and say, oh, gee, look, we had no variances. So it's kind of one of the beginning tests of is the plan going to be fairly accurate? For the month, revenues came in about $1.7 million under plan. About 1%. Expenditures are under plan by about $9 million for the month of July. Looking at the highlights for that month, on revenues, we told the committee we are in the collection period, and I didn't change this slide. That says first half property taxes. It's first half of the fiscal year. It's actually second half property taxes because we're on collection. So my apologies, I didn't correct that. And what that means is while the tax bills are out and the collection period is open, we may request advances from the county auditor for up to 90% of the taxes that have been already paid, collected, and certified, and we do that, and that's what's reflected in July. So advances can be faster or slower one year to the next. Again, another item that once we get settlement in August, we'll have a better picture for what that settlement period looks like. The state aid calculation thus far, what we're seeing on the state reports, our SFPRs, does not include the $11.8 million yet out of the state budget. So as we look at that and compare what's at the state, their report versus us, you should see about $11.8 million, $12 million difference there. That should, well, I don't know how it's going to rectify itself from a reporting standpoint. We've learned that the student wellness funds will come to us not monthly, as I've got planned. I thought they would come, I thought, well, it's state aid, it's going to come in monthly payments. I've learned it's not, it's going to come in 2 payments. I believe is it October and February perhaps that they're going to come to us, so we'll get two payments there. I'm thinking about going and revising the plan to reflect that, because otherwise we're going to have variances in state revenue on a monthly basis, and you're going to hear the same explanation that I put in the 11.8 spread over 12 months, and it's only coming in 2 months. So I'll probably have to go back and fix that for, August and the months going forward. But that was really the revenue highlights there, because it's so early in the year, there's not much else we can draw from the July results. You can see here property taxes slightly under plan, state aid kind of on target, and all other revenues on target as well. Other financing sources, those bars jump out. Now note that the scale on the y-axis has gone from hundreds of millions of dollars to tens of millions of dollars here, so the magnitude is a lot less. But we got a return of advance that was larger than anticipated. And then on the expenditure side, we're under by about 8.9 for the month, and year to date, personnel at 6.4. Again, as I mentioned, it's more proportionally split. That variance is more proportionally split between salaries, wages, and benefits. Also, the personnel numbers, while we're running under plan, the July numbers, because that represents a run out pretty much of last year's contracts being paid out. The new contracts, any new agreement you might reach with by virtue of collective bargaining, that won't be reflected until September and October months. So that should work itself out. And all other expenditure lines, except for the other objects, well, I told you it's running over there, they're running under plan by $2.5 million. So not terribly noteworthy, but that's where we are for July. Again, graphically, personnel under, charters on spot, all others are running under. And from a variance standpoint, we do this kind of high-low breakdown, and it's best exemplified here in this chart. All the dollar amounts are low. Our dichotomy is 5 million or more one way or the other, or 5% one way or the other is considered high. So everything's low except for the 2 items, and that was a variance percentage for all of the revenues out of the financing sources. But those are small dollar amounts. They only represent 3.4% of our overall estimated revenues. On the expenditure side, again, you'll see personnel stands out only because of dollar amount variance, and some of the others are because of percent variances. That's shown here. And so I don't worry about the percentage variances with 1 month under our belt thus far. I think I mentioned to the committee that in my previous life, when we looked at economic data and saw things going on in various economic metrics, the comment always was, one data point does not a trend make. So this is one data point so far, and again, this committee is very good at watching these month to month. So for the month, down in revenue and over in expenditures, and so that's how we ended up July.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Are there questions for the treasurer on either the June or July report? Mr. Chairman?
Just a very quick comment. Thank you so much for the report. There were a couple of other things that came out of it. I certainly hope colleagues at the table and those who are watching see that there, of course, are some apparent strengths here, that we are under plan in terms of expenditures and over in terms of revenues, and that we've utilized these resources very effectively. The other takeaway is this, though, is that there's some threats. There's some threats. And those threats are to our pilots program, payment in lieu of taxes. So here we have, and this is another legislative piece that Dr. Roush or anyone can speak to, but the legislative environment is looking to possibly make it a little more difficult for school districts like ours to bring down or contest property values for commercial property. Make it more of a rigorous process that if there's any mistake, if there's any not dotting of an I or crossing of a T, that we could actually have to start the process over and maybe even make it more expensive for us to do this. So I want to make sure that at the table, the committee was aware of that, so we can not only just build a team who are informed, but also advocates in their roles as committee members and as folks who are part of the finance community. So I wanted to make sure we knew about some of the threats that are preeminent as well. But I thank you so much for this report. Here's another example of job well done. Last is this, is there was an opportunity study that you walked through in your department where you actually got to introduce us to your newest addition. Can you please share with us her name and her position, please?
Yes. This year we created a new position, Director of Financial Process Improvement, because much of what we're asked to look at in terms of coming out of audits, whether it's internal or external, all about processes, procedures, methodologies. And so process improvement I wanted to, we have to make that a focus. And since that's a focus and it's important to all of us, we're devoting resources towards that. So this new position was created at the director level. New person, yes, to the position, but not new to us in the district. I appointed Jenny Vanover, who was our special funds supervisor previously. And Jenny has been responsible for overseeing our area treasurers and handling cash in buildings and dealing with student activity accounts. And she's led the charge on, if you recall, we have that infamous 24-hour deposit law, and how do we better handle cash, make it more secure, get it to the bank on time and accurately. And so one of her charge was, from me, was to eliminate cash in the buildings, eliminate it. Now, is that possible? Maybe not, but from my perspective, that's the charge, eliminate cash. And so she set forth in a variety of ways to begin to address that. Heretofore, we'd not had online collections. So our parents can pay for fees online, we can use credit cards, we can do ACH against your checking account. We have a couple of mechanisms out there. We use Infinite Campus for student fees because it's got student information. Another example of collaboration where if you invite the right people to the table and you start talking about your issues, someone on the other side of the table in a different part of the organization says, well, we can do that. And we didn't know that we could do those collections. So that worked out really well. And then we have another option where it's the firm that we use is called Local Level, and you can do ticket sales online through that. So as Jenny explained to the committee, one of the quickest and most rabid adopters of this was the drama department, because we can actually take the auditorium and, just like when you go to Ticketmaster, show a picture of the auditorium and buy seats. And it's all online, and we do it electronically. She turned that all around in like 18 months to take an organization our size and to go from nothing to go from that. She really knew how to do the process improvement. She tackled another project about when a new hire comes on, how do you get them signed up for and approved in Munis. And when she did it with some of her new employees, it seemed to be a little bit too onerous to her. So as a project, she wanted to go to a class on the Lean Six Sigma methodology, and she took this on as a project. So she learned that methodology, went through a project with us, so it was a double benefit. We have somebody that's got some of that training, and we also get the end result of that project. So through all of that, she was the perfect person to put in that position, and I'm real happy with that. So her charge is, her first charge is to find her replacement, and we were working on that today through interviews, and then she'll get started on her process improvement, which it's going to be a big job in laying out a plan of attack to implement what we can out of all those recommendations. Can I go back to your comment about the legislation?
Yes, very quickly, sir. Yes.
Okay. What this has to do with is the right of taxpayers as well as tax receivers to challenge the value on property. Now, we don't go after residential. We only do commercial, industrial, and non-owner occupied income producing properties. But you have this right as a homeowner yourself to go to the county auditor and say, the value of my property is not correct because, and then you provide evidence of that. Well, we participate in that because typically, if you as a taxpayer is going to the Board of Revision, if you as a taxpayer is going, that's correct, is going to the Board of Revision, are you asking for an increase in value so your taxes go up, or are you asking for a decrease in value so your taxes go down? I think the answer is pretty clear. Typically, those complaints are to reduce the value and reduce the taxes that you pay. What we do on behalf of the Board of Education is to monitor that and file a complaint, a counter complaint, if you will, participate in that process to be able to review that information to make sure that it's valid and appropriate and that we agree with it. Because the goal of this is to make sure that the property in the district is valued at fair market value. If we're all at fair market value, then you pay your right fair share, you pay your right fair share, you pay your right fair share. But if for some reason Jennifer can go in and nobody checks Jennifer's data and she doesn't have, she has data that just makes it look good for her and her value goes down, one of two things can happen depending upon when that reduction is approved. One thing that could happen is her taxes go down and the school district loses taxes. The other thing that could happen, depending upon when you do it in the process, if you do it early enough, her value being lower causes the tax burden to be shifted from her to all of you. And probably there may be two people in this room that really understand how that works. But that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure that the process applies a fair market value to all the parcels in our district so that the tax burden is shared fairly and equitably as the law requires. And so this bill, I'm going to switch to opinion now. So I'm not going to quote the bill, so you're going to switch to my opinion. Really, it attempts to set some procedural roadblocks for us participating in that process. I've spoken once or twice against this, not this particular bill, but it's raised its head again in previous sessions and another similar bill, and we'll continue to fight against that because this process works. How do I know it works? Because we get pilot payments. Because we sit with the taxpayers, the commercial taxpayers, and negotiate a settlement that they believe is fair and we believe is fair. So the process works. It does not need to be fixed. And so that's where we're headed with that. Thanks. I just wanted to get that on the record, so to speak. And that concludes my reports, finally.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Again, pointing out conduct of the General Assembly that some may find untoward. Not that I want to keep pointing that out. Mr. Ragland.
Regarding that, Mr. Horgan, do we utilize outside counsel to drive that process?
We do.
Is outside counsel paid on a transactional basis, or is that a flat fee for the outside counsel to conduct these reevaluations throughout the year?
Flat fee.
It's a flat fee?
It's not a finder's fee.
Right, yeah, right, exactly. Okay, thank you. My second question is regarding the new hire as well as the electronic payments and the elimination of cash throughout the district. And I mentioned this in the committee meeting as well, but I'd like for you to speak about our athletic events, if you could. The availability of utilizing credit cards or some sort of electronic payment for entry as well as concessions at our athletic events. Is that a possibility? And what do you attribute the fact that it is not happening to? And are we exposed from a safety perspective with the amount of cash that we are handling based on our athletic events?
Where there's cash, there's risk. So the goal, as I said, was to eliminate, but we all know that what we're going to do is minimize that as great we can. But you are correct. There is, where there's cash, there's risk, and we like to, and that risk is not only, for loss to the district, but also risk for those employees, because inevitably if something comes up, you trace that cash process back and try and find where did that break down, where did it go? So there's risk for, so if we can eliminate cash, reduce cash, that helps the risk associated to our employees as well. Relative to athletic events, it's just a matter of education, training, information, making everybody comfortable with it. Some are early adopters, some aren't. That's pretty much my understanding of it. Is it available? Yes. Could it be made? Would we make it available? Yes. If they want to begin to start that, pilot it. Jenny could probably speak better to her efforts in that area. But as you roll this out, those who step forward that think this is a great idea, like I said, if you're an early adopter and they see the benefit of it right away, they jump on that bandwagon. It would certainly be a goal to, where we can, go to electronic means to receive payments and have electronic forms of ticketing as well. I know she had some conversation, I think, with them. Didn't she mention about the concept of an annual pass? So rather than game by game, do an annual pass. So those conversations are being had. I just think it's a matter of wrapping our arms around that and getting everybody comfortable with it before we get to further implementation.
Yes, sir. Mr. Ragland.
I guess I would like, personally, I would like more information about the process by which those conversations are being had. I mean, we're coming directly into our athletic season now. If this is something that could diminish risk, and it seems as if there's, some choices being made not to do that, I would be in favor of doing whatever we would need to do to work with our athletics department to get this in motion, at least on a pilot basis, immediately, so that we could move towards something that would be kind of uniform across the district. If there could be some information gathering and maybe getting something back to the board about where we are within those conversations. I mean, we've got football games that are coming up here in the next couple of weeks. If this is something that we could get some folks trained on and start and see how it works for them, this may be a good opportunity.
I'll get with Ms. Vanover and see if we can give you a little history about that conversation. And if I need your muscle, Mr. Ragland, I'll be sure to call you.
I don't know about the muscle. I just think that I think we're missing a huge opportunity.
Sure,
I mean,
sure.
when I travel to some of our suburban partners in education, I don't carry cash with me.
Right.
And I'm able to do everything that a normal body would do at an athletic event, with a credit card. And I can see where the safety, issue would be a problem for us. It might, cause us to need additional resources in making sure that our security folks are there and all those types of things.
I understand too, collection at a athletic facility is a little bit different than collection in an office.
Right. Yeah.
And to be honest with you, some of the facilities at some of the suburban school districts are different than the facilities we have here. So we have to make sure that we have the technology available.
Absolutely.
So I don't think there are any purposeful roadblocks, but some things are easier to accomplish than others. And like I said, this has turned around dramatically in just about 18 months. So.
Hey, Columbus students deserve, right? If they've got it over there, then we should have it for us.
Committee Chairman.
Thank you. If I can just make a very quick point of clarification that kind of takes you a little further in that comment. The treasurer is absolutely correct. The process is going to be different in an athletic situation. But here's some of the barriers, right? One of them is not everyone has access to a credit card or a bank account to be able to use that kind of transaction. I think the fair word to use is not elimination of cash. I think it's just reduction. I think that's the most practical approach. And I think we can certainly talk more about that in the committee as these conversations are more ongoing. But you're going to see a reduction of cash handling, not a total elimination. And I think just on the simple fact that you have some folks who are more comfortable using cash, you have some folks, you have the paradigm, the ongoing paradigm of concession cash use. I mean, there's so much, but I think the fair target or goal, aim, would be to reduce cash handling and create a means by which we make that more equitable with the electronic piece. But we're on the same street.
No, and I certainly agree. I certainly agree with you. I don't think that cash would necessarily be eliminated. But, I mean, let's face it, it's 2019. And a lot of folks do not carry cash. A lot of folks carry credit cards. And we've identified this as a safety issue, particularly with folks that are leaving very dark stadiums and very dark parking lots very late at night. We understand that our flank is exposed with that. And so whatever we would need to do as a part of upgrading what it is that we need so that our students don't feel inferior in those types of situations, I would be all for it. I just, you know, and all I'm asking for is, you know, a report on what the process is. Where are we within the conversation? I'm not asking for a complete elimination of cash at all of our events, but hey, if we can reduce the amount of cash by 30, 40%, if we can encourage other folks to have a more safe means of coming into our athletic events and all of our other events because they've got those security barriers that a credit card payment or an electronic payment can provide for them. I think that's a move towards the 21st century. And so, you know, for me, it's an ask of, you know, where we are within the process, what is it that we would need to do in order to get some uniformity across the district to try this out, to see if it's something that we can move towards.
We can certainly
Great.
work on that in
Great conversation for the
Committee
committee.
discussion.
Yep. Board Member
Mr.
Gibbs.
President.
Yes, thank you for that. And I would just think this is a great time to infuse my commercial for community-wide broadband. And as you bring back that information, those systems only work if the internet is working. And so as we are at the incredible beginning of our facilities master plan and we finish that and we get ready to look to building new buildings, that as you bring back information, how do we build facilities with the internet capability to handle 5 or 6 machines, 5 or 6. Hi, Alex. How do we build, you know, clearly connectivity is a challenge all across the board, but as you think about it, I would offer, including how can we have the best connectivity in our facilities in our next round to retrofit it and to build forward those spaces so that we can do a card line and a cash line. They move flawlessly with safety and security in mind with gates. And just for the record, please don't try us. The police walk all of our treasurers to the car after the game, so please don't try it. And the football players, you know. So we do have safety after all of our athletic events to make sure those things move and they get to where they need to be safely. But all of your points are well taken, and it's the connectivity. I think that allows the technology to come to life, and we can get there. And I'm looking for a state of art, you know, all of our athletic and our theaters as well. I think that is exciting for all of our, because we have a world-class theater department. Don't say it, EA. I see you. I see EA getting ready. I see it because y'all are amazing. But as all of our events, right, are moving forward, the connectivity, if you bring that to us, what do we need for infrastructure to make that work? I think that would be amazing. And whatever we can do online to take it off of our system and to put it in a more secure cloud, I think that would be great. And I'm sure our internal auditor would talk about our technology, how to keep it safe, how to keep the data safe, and all of those pieces. So I'm excited by the entire conversation.
All right, hearing nothing further related to the treasurer's report, I just want to thank you on behalf of the board for bringing on the director of process improvement. It's a great move. I want to thank you for being supportive of that and making sure that happened. I'm looking forward to the contribution she's going to make. Thank you very much for that. All right, thank you. Let's move on. And next item, Board 9, Board Matters. I'm actually going to call on Board Member Brown if he'd like to talk a little bit about items 9.1 and 9.2.
Yes, thank you. On behalf of the Policy Review Committee, we do have a number of bylaw updates and a number of policy amendments that we're recommending. All of these were presented at our last regular meeting, first reading. I've not heard anything from anybody since that time, and they're now presented here for adoption. This is the second reading, and I described them in a little bit more detail at the last meeting, but these are nearly all cleanup. Just a matter of complying with the law and complying with some language fixes. There's nothing in any of these that is noteworthy in terms of, affecting how we operate or affecting policies that anybody is going to have concerns about. So with that, if anybody has any particular questions about anything, they are here, and I'll move approval of all of these that are laid out in the agenda.
Thank you. Yes, I was just going to clarify.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
you want to do it in two parts? Is
You
that what you're-
need to. You have
Okay.
different
That's-
vote passage requirements,
Right.
majority requirements on
So-
those
I was
two. So-
anticipating that we may be unanimous on both, but just to be safe,
Please.
we'll take the bylaw amendments first, and these will require, for reasons that are unknown to me and something else that we probably need to address, but these will require 6 of the 7 of us to approve. And again, we may want to revisit that threshold in the future, but for now, 6 of 7. So with that, I move approval of the bylaw amendments.
All right, so Committee Chairman Brown has moved item 9.1. It's been seconded by Vice President Cole. We understand we need a supermajority, and if anyone's going to look into why that's required, I would allocate that to Mr. Brown. Any discussion on 9.1? Please call the roll, Mr. Treasurer.
President Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Vice President Cole?
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs? Mr. Ragland?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes? Ms. Adair? That motion carried.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Outstanding, Mr. Brown.
And the 9.2 is the group of policy amendments. These require a simple majority for passage. I've already described them, and I move approval of the policy amendments.
Second.
9.2 has been duly moved and seconded. Any questions? Mr. Treasurer?
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Vice President Cole?
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs? Mr. Ragland?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes? Ms. Adair? President Baker?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Let's move on. Is there a motion that we approve our consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
All right, and colleagues, please note that the annual audit plan. Got it. Please note that the annual audit plan from OIA is included in the consent agenda, that plan that was discussed earlier by the internal auditor. Colleagues, any questions, comments on any piece of legislation contained within the agenda this evening, the consent agenda? Hearing none, seeing none, Mr. Treasurer, please call the roll.
Vice President Cole?
Yes.
Ms. Gibbs? Mr. Ragland?
Yes, with the exception of 17.2, for which I abstain.
Ms. Reyes? Ms. Adair? President Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you very much. Let's move on then to announcements. Colleagues, any announcements or points of pride you'd like to share this evening? Board Member Gibbs.
I have a few points of pride I'd like to share, just a few. As Dr. Dixon shared, we had an amazing summer graduation. on Saturday. This was an amazing team. His aunt and uncle had their own shirts, as well as mom. They were an incredible inspiration. All in all, the 100 or so graduates that came out, even if it was one, it represented perseverance, persistence, and those kids who did not give up. It is clearly our favorite graduation of the year because they had to work just a little bit harder, so we're very excited by that. To the conversation we just had, our amazing safety and security team, they are at every single event. They are there, they work very hard. They had kids in the audience that came up to hug them, to give them, thank you for pushing me along. It was bittersweet. It was my last summer graduation. I truly enjoyed it. It was emotional. I thank Dr. Dixon and all the leaders that was there. They were absolutely inspiring. Mr. Greg Costello, he was the best MC ever. Our student speaker came from South. She was honest and real and humbling and very inspiring. And so just excited by that. Afterwards, this is the Tyler Hill Foundation. Tyler Hill was a student at Centennial who tragically lost his life, but his mother is carrying on his tradition. And I'll share this information with all of you. But in the spirit of, he played on the football team at Centennial, a class of 2015. But in his memory, she collects scholarship dollars to send students on historically black college tours. And so she was at the King Arts Complex back to school rally that day. I'm just passing out information, and so I'll share that with our Director of Partnerships and Miss Alicia Gillison. But she lives in Chicago, and she comes back here every year, and her scholarships provide an opportunity for students from Chicago and Columbus, Ohio to attend, and it pays for a historically black college tour because, as Dr. Dixon says, exposure changes expectations, right? And I thought it was just amazing to see her there. So that was right after graduation. And finally, I am very excited that a member of our Board External Monitoring Committee and Innovation and Reform received the inaugural, the very first, Rudine S. Bishop Distinguished Diversity Enhancement Award. Rudine Bishop was a leader in African American children's literature at The Ohio State University. So the dean, who was here at the last meeting, the dean of the College of Education and Human Ecology, gave this award to our very own Ari Tolles. And Ari works very hard on behalf of Columbus City Schools, and it is given to a staff or faculty member for breaking down barriers and providing diversity in action, deed, and work. And so please help me congratulate Mr. Ari Tolles. Thank you. I really am very proud of you and the work that you, in diversifying our thought in Board External and in Innovation and Reform and in all our conversations. So I'm very glad. He went to the Columbus Alternative High School, a very proud alumni of the. So he has continued the work at the Ohio State University, and for which we are incredibly proud. So thank you. So that concludes my points of pride. There are so many, but before I leave, I just want to make two more announcements. Number one, school is about to start. Please slow down. We have thousands of children who will be crossing streets, going through crosswalks. Please pay attention to the school driver zone. When it says 20 miles per hour, please pay attention. Pay attention when they're not paying attention, right? We know people are in their phones. Please don't be on your phone and behind the wheel at the same time, because there's a lot of things that we're up against, but they're no match for a 1,000-pound car, a 2-ton car. So please pay attention in our school zone. And if Dr. Dixon and her team, if someone will tell us, if you still need to register or get something done, get your kid into school, here she's ready. Look at her, she's ready, she's ready. What should you do? What should you do if you still need help getting registered and getting all set for the first day of school?
Thank you, Board Member Gibbs, for that question. You should come as soon as possible to the Central Enrollment Center, which is 430 Cleveland Avenue. And if you have not done your online registration, do it tonight while you're in your jammies in your own home. If you don't have computer access, please feel free to come to the Enrollment Center at 8 a.m. We will not open tomorrow because of convocation until 1 o'clock p.m., but we will be open until 7:30 p.m. So please feel free. And then remember, we're going to continue with evening hours on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and open all day Saturday for the next 3 Saturdays in a row.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And one more shout out to Ms. Lisa Gillison and the Florida A&M University. They held I put the flyer up. We held a session, and 40 students from Columbus City Schools attended a session, and most of them were not seniors. They were freshmen and sophomores and juniors who came out to the Florida A&M University information session. So when we give those opportunities to our parents, they listen, they come, and they're eager to get them involved. So I'm excited. I'm excited for the first day of school. I'm excited for everything that's coming. It's our last first day of school. I'm just saying, we're excited.
Yes, we are. Thank you. Board Member Reyes?
Just a couple of announcements following up Board Member Gibbs. There are a lot of clap-ins throughout the district. There's a lot of flyers out there, East High School, inviting members of our community to welcome our students back into their schools. So please keep an eye on Facebook and our calendar to ensure that our students are starting on a good foot. I know there was a lot of reports on the media thanking a lot of our community and community partners for backpacks and supplying our district with school supplies, not only on behalf of our students, but also on behalf of our teachers and administrators in the district. So I just, as part of the board, want to make sure that you also know that we are very, very thankful of you taking care of our community, because our kids, it's our kids. So it's thank you on behalf of us for that. Also, many of our communities being involved in the big table conversations around the city through the Columbus Foundation on August 28th. We will have a big table conversation at Briggs and at Fort Hayes during the 3 school lunch hours. That evening, we're also hosting a big table conversation for parents from 6 to 8 at Columbus Downtown High School. Please call us if you need more information. Also, as part of my other board hat with CAPA, Columbus Association for the Performing Arts, I want to thank Columbus City Schools for being present. I talked to many of our teachers and our new administrators. I understand you had a really good time coming out there. It was a safe and dry weekend. So thank you very much for Columbus City Schools. And as a lead-in, if we are doing anything in the district for Hispanic Heritage Month, which runs from September 15th to October 15th, there are a group of community leaders from either the Franklin County Sheriff's Office to the Ohio Latino Affairs Commission and San Martin de Porres, who are creating a calendar of events for the whole month. If the district wants public and community information to be disseminated in this beautiful calendar that's going to be printed throughout the city and all of our media outlets, I'll pass on the link. It's an Eventbrite link so that we can bring our community out to our schools.
Board Member Reyes? Board Member Adair?
Thank you. I wanted to give a shout out to the city of Columbus because I've seen crews out working on our school lights. So I've seen them in several locations as I've driven around town, which helps make sure that drivers know when to slow down. You should really just slow down anytime you're around a school, but when to officially slow down. And I know that sometimes we do have public safety, our police officers who are out there who help monitor, and sometimes there's the speed trailers out there. So again, just to echo, please be safe. I do want to say, I know that for those listening at home, just because today the speaker's comments got to me, and we can't really comment. We can't comment. If you listen to what President Baker says, he says, do you have clarifying questions? But I want this community to really understand that this board cares about our kids. My daughter is in a legacy school, and every day in the hot weather, she has to, and her classmates and her teachers have to deal with that. And that, even though nobody could say anything, just know that we understand that. And unfortunately, it isn't just an easy thing. I mean, it sounds so easy, right? And I know we have our wonderful teachers who are spending their own money to buy portable air conditioning. But just know we care. And this board, as a point of pride for us, I think, and with the superintendent, we are on a path, a strategic path to move forward so that every student in our district has a safe and wonderful learning environment to be in. And that is really the goal. We want to make sure that we are using holistic models where we have equity across every building. I was at Eastmoor Academy this summer, going to a wonderful show, a wonderful opportunity for our kids to be in with the Children's Theater here, and I sweated it out in that auditorium. I was at the ice cream social, so shout out to all the families and staff and PTAs who are eating all that ice cream this week. But I sweated it out in the gym yesterday. It was hot, and fortunately, summer in Ohio will end towards the end of August. But it is a concern. And I know that we don't get to really say that when the speakers, and they're not really here anymore to hear that. But I just want the public to understand that we do hear you. And we do want to make change in this district, especially at the bottom line that impacts our kids every day. So I just felt like I needed to say that because we live it. I live it. I have a kid that comes home with a headache because she's too hot. So,
Thank you, Board Member Adair. Any other announcements, points of pride? Do we have any more photographs to share? So, stuffing backpacks was mentioned earlier. So, I don't know how many thousands of backpacks or how many tons of school supplies have been donated, but a bunch, 50 or 60 people were stuffing backpacks after summer graduation the other day. Thank you to all of you who volunteered to do that. Thank you to everyone who has given and donated to make this possible. I know some people send trucks full of backpacks, and so every single backpack and every single school supply that somebody gives helps one of our students, and so we couldn't be more grateful. Anything else? Speaking of summer graduation, go back. So I believe that's all of the principals who were at summer graduation, an amazing event. Board Member Gibbs gave her very last keynote at a summer graduation. She held it together better than I would have. It was hard enough sitting there listening to her. She did a great job. Amazing students who persevered and held on and were successful, in part because of these principals, their teachers, everybody else, families. Just an amazing experience. And then I think maybe one more photograph. The last photograph is just, I think, board members and the superintendent who were able to attend that event. So just an absolutely amazing, amazing event that I will miss very much. Anything else? All right. Then I will, assuming Interim Director Smido doesn't have anything to share from the city. Thank you for being here. All right, then I'll ask the Vice President to offer a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Board of Education recess into executive session per section 121.22G1, Ohio Revised Code, to consider the appointment, employment, or compensation of public employees, and section 121.22G4 of the Ohio Revised Code to prepare for, conduct, or review negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms of or conditions of their employment.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Hearing no discussion, Mr. Treasurer, will you call the roll?
Ms. Gibbs? Yes. Mr. Ragland?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
Ms. Adair?
Yes.
President Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Vice President Cole?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you very much. The board will now recess into executive session. We will adjourn while in those chambers without returning to these. Good evening.